Of one, and welcome to the latest edition of Goodison Park, my home. And I'm very pleased to say that we've got a man who had three different incarnations into his Everton existence, Alan Irvine. Thanks for coming down, Alan. How are you today?
I'm very well, thanks. Yep. Nice to be here.
Yeah, plenty of great tales to tell, like I said, and whether it be as a player and an assistant manager, and then ahead of the academy. I mean, there's so many times that you were with the Blues over the years in different roles for the club. But if I could take you back right to the beginning, obviously you were at Queen's Park, and obviously for those who know football, it was obviously an amateur club. So how did that actually come about, the move to Everton in the first place?
Well, it actually started in the previous October.
Yeah.
So as you say, I was at Queen's Park. We were amateurs. We signed a 1-year registration. Mm-hmm. Effectively, we were the first Bosmans, because at the end of every year, we were free. Yeah. From both sides, the club could let you go, or you could walk away from the club. Everton actually approached Queen's Park in the October, having watched me at the beginning of that season. It was a scout called Bill Davis, who worked up there under Harry Cook. Yeah. And Gordon Lee was the manager at the time. Yeah,
which we'll come to. Yeah.
And I was, I was just a young player from Glasgow. I was an insurance broker. I didn't expect to become a professional footballer. And Everton, as I say, came along. They tried to get Queen's Park to let me go. They offered them money. They offered them a game at Goodison. They offered them equipment, strips. But Queen's stood to their principles and said, no, it's a 1-year registration. If we start letting one person go on that basis, we will lose players all the time during the season. That was really hard to take, because I didn't know if that chance would be ever there again. So I continued playing as an amateur, training 3 nights a week, studying for an insurance degree, and working as an insurance broker. Yeah. And fortunately, by the end of the season, there were a lot of clubs interested, and I had my choice of 23 clubs. Right. As I say, it was easy. It was an easy one for clubs to do, because I was unknown. They weren't going to have to pay any transfer money. It wasn't going to be big wages for them, so it was easy. So I'm not fooled by the fact that 23 clubs wanted to spend a fortune on me. They didn't. They wanted to get me for nothing, and put me in their youth programme and see what happens from there. Yeah. And it came down in the end to Manchester City, who were in the cup final at the time, and Everton. Mm-hmm. Even though I was a Rangers fan, and I could have signed for Rangers at that time, and I went to speak to them as a Rangers fan. And I have to say that when I went to see City, and I understand it better now, but they were a bit preoccupied with the cup final, whereas Everton did a great job in terms of convincing me, which I was always leaning to anyway, but convincing me that I should come here. Yeah. So I came, and it was a great decision. Yeah,
I'd say it was a great decision. Your mind was made up, but I mean, it was. I was just checking the records actually. So you spoke to Gordon Lee, but within almost hours of you having the meeting with him, he was sacked. That was the end of his tenure.
Yep, I was there at the time. Yeah, and Gordon had to go out of the room. Obviously, he got the bad news. But he came back and he said to me, I'm not going to be here, but I'm telling you to sign for this club. Wow. Yeah. Which was amazing. Yeah. He could easily have been bitter and could have said, get yourself back to Manchester City. Because he knew that I had options. Yeah. But absolutely brilliant. And it was not just a mark of the man, but it was a mark of the club as well, because clearly you don't do that if you're feeling bitter about a club, if you don't like a club, if you don't think the people are good. Yeah. It was very clear that he loved the club.
Yeah, because like I said, that could have gone one of two ways, but in a way that reinforced your decision. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, because you're still not quite sure if you're making the right decision. I had made my decision. I was going to sign for Gordon Lee, but But yeah, I actually became Howard's first signing.
Yeah.
Albeit that it wasn't mentioned.
Yeah.
It was a magnificent 7 + 1
I was
that we won't bother talking about.
Yeah, it's just a lovely footnote now. So, but you mentioned obviously your insurance broker at the time. I mean, what happened to all that? Then did you just obviously move on then, or did you keep your hand in?
No, I mean it turned out to be a great year for me.
Yeah.
I got my insurance degree.
Yeah.
I signed for Everton, and Queen's Park won the second division,
right?
Which was just perfect.
Yeah.
And I got nominated as Player of the Year.
Yeah.
In that division. So it was a brilliant year for me, and a year that was obviously life changing.
Yeah.
And it really was life changing because my last game for Queen's Park was against Cowdenbeath at Central Park.
Okay.
And my next game of football was for Everton in Japan against Inter Milan.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to ask you about that Japan tour, wasn't it? Japan. I mean, that must have been an eye opener going out straight out to go and play in there.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
I couldn't believe what was happening. You know, here I was now going out to join a squad of players who I knew from television.
Yeah,
who were top players that I really, really liked, and from a distance, obviously not knowing them, but here I was as part of it, and it was just bizarre, just how quickly my life had changed in so many ways. And I have to say that when I first signed for Everton, I didn't think I would ever play for the first team.
Right.
I just thought, this is great, let's just enjoy it while you can. It's too big a step, you know, Cowdenbeath to Inter Milan is too big a step. But fortunately, things went really well for me, and I did play, and I played a number of games, and it was the start of, you know, my life with Everton, which, as you say, has been 3 different chapters. But it was the Japan trip was just a real eye opener in so many ways.
From just like a lifestyle thing as well as football?
Everything. Life. Yeah. I mean, you said to me, what did I do with insurance afterwards? I kept doing it. Yeah. I kept on. So I was an ACII, and for about the next 10, 12 years, I kept paying my subs every year because I thought I'll be going back here soon. Yeah. And it was probably only when I finished playing and started coaching that I thought, well, it's not really looking like I'm going back now, you know. So let's just move on. Yeah.
And so you said about you at the time you didn't even have aspirations. Well, obviously you had aspirations, but you felt it would be a big jump to get to the first team. But before the end of that calendar year, you know, you made your first team debut at Goodison Park against European Cup holders Aston Villa. Beat them 2-0. And as we were talking before we went on air there, they had Howard Kendall in the side alongside you. I mean, what a debut, eh?
Fantastic. And I got man of the match in the game as well, which was just incredible. Really. I mean, I found out during, I was called over. I was training with the reserves the day before. Alan Irvine got injured. I get the call to go round and join in the training. Didn't think for a moment that was for me to play, but all of a sudden I'm in the squad. Yeah. Fantastic, you know, this is lovely. I didn't think I'd ever be in the squad. So all of a sudden then I was there on the Saturday, and I got told about an hour before kickoff that I was playing. Okay. And that was probably really good management. Yeah, calm the nerves, if you told me the day before, I might have been a bit nervous, a bit more nervous, let's say. Yeah,
was any of the family down to see that?
Yeah, they were. Fortunately, you know, it was obviously a late dash down, but Glasgow's not so far away. So.
Yeah, excellent. Do you actually remember much from the game? Obviously, you say you were man of the match. Do you remember much from the game at all? I was checking the notes earlier. It was an early missed penalty. Trevor Rossett a penalty wide, and then Mick Lyons and Peter Easter, I think, got the goals. Do you actually remember from the day and playing at Goodison for the first time?
I do. You know, I remember from very much everything was kind of, everything I remember was about things that happened with me, and I had a couple of good runs early on. That gave me a bit of confidence. And at the end of the game, I had a run and a cross, which led to the second goal, Peter Easter's goal. Yeah. So it was. I remember the little bits that I was involved in, which, as you know, in any game it's not a huge amount.
No.
Even if you have a really good game, you're not involved in lots of things that are happening. But yeah, it was a debut that couldn't have gone better. I mean, I said about Cowdenbeath, and my next league game was against European champions. And of course, at that time, Forest were European Cup winners, Liverpool were European Cup winners, Aston Villa were. So it was a really high standard of league, really.
And it was a time of great transition. And you mentioned the Magnificent Seven there, which you weren't officially part of, but apart from Neville Southall, none of them really ever made it ever, and then the rest of the team was changing. What was it around? Was it like being at Everton at that time? Because obviously there were difficult moments as well, but then obviously things really came good for the team.
Well, the start was brilliant because I was in a group of really promising young players. So the reserve team at that time was a really good team. Yeah. And actually, what happened was, in time, obviously, Colin Harvey was the reserve team coach at the time. Colin moved to be with the first team, and gradually a number of us moved from the reserves into the first team, and we were young and inexperienced, but it was a great grounding, because it's always very fortunate. Having worked in youth development over the years, I know how important it is that players get the challenges that they need at the right times. Yeah. And we were lucky enough to get those challenges, and Howard obviously had faith in the young players, and clearly Colin would have helped that, because I think we'd played before I got in the first team. I think we'd played 11 league games and won 11 league games, you know. And as I say, there were a number of lads who were all going to come through. Yeah. And it took, as you say, we had some tough times, and we eventually kind of became a much stronger first team. Yeah, clearly the boys, after I left as well, continued to progress and do really well. Yeah,
and you mentioned actually, just when we were chatting before, about obviously when you made your debut and you had Howard alongside you, that you felt that he actually coached you more during that particular game than he'd actually done on the training pitch. Such was the way of things back then.
It was very different. I mean, nowadays, the emphasis on coaching is very, very high, and it's very important, and players want to be coached, they expect to be coached. Yeah. At that time, it was a little bit sink or swim, and it was a case of, well, you're in the team, you've got to grow up quickly, and the senior players around you, if you had the right ones, could really, really help you to develop, and they coached you in-game. And I still believe that to this day there's no better coaching than what happens in-game, because it's just, playing alongside Howard in either reserves or in the first team, and he's just saying, tuck in this way a little bit, push up, drop off, you need to be a bit wider and things like that. And he's encouraging, you make a mistake, get on with it, don't worry, carry on. So that was great. But we trained in those days. Probably the difference I could say is we trained. We did stuff to make us a bit fitter, but we didn't really do things to make us better players.
Okay, yeah.
The games made you better.
Yeah, and obviously I'll come on to those two League Cup finals against Liverpool. But before that, I remember seeing in a previous interview you'd done, you said one of your biggest disappointments was actually one of your best games you felt in an Everton shirt. There was at the FA Cup quarter-final, Manchester United, where you done particularly well that day, and then the sucker punch was at the stoppage time winner there, and you actually said that was one of your low points really, because you'd done so well and you didn't get the result that day.
Yeah, we had all done well, to kind of to have the performance that we did and be so close to what should have been a good result. But was it Frank or was it Lou Macari?
Frank Stapleton, 92nd minute.
I think Lou Macari headed it.
Right,
Frank volleyed it, And I played with Frank many years later at Blackburn, and I did mention that to him. Yeah. I mean, it was a magnificent goal to win the game, but a big blow because we had played really well.
Yeah. So then 84, obviously Liverpool were the preeminent side in the whole of Europe, never mind England at that time. But you got going to Wembley, the first ever all-Merseyside final. Do you remember what it was like actually in the city around that time ahead of the game?
I thought it was remarkable.
Yeah.
Bear in mind, I'm from Glasgow.
Yeah.
I know the Rangers-Celtic rivalry, and obviously you've got the religious aspect in there. And whilst I was a Rangers fan, I had a lot of friends who were Celtic fans, and we got on really well. But there was a real element of hatred from a number of fans. It wasn't them all by any means, and it still isn't. But there was a large enough element to be significant that kind of hated each other. Yeah. I came here and I could not believe the derby matches here. My very first derby, you've got Liverpudlians in the Gladys Street end. You go and play in the derby at Anfield. You've got Evertonians in the Kop. The build up to the game, even kind of going down Wembley Way, it was reds and blues all mixed in together and all having a great time. Yeah. And the stadium all mixed in together as well. Yeah. And it was just incredible. So much so, actually, that when I was assistant to David before his first derby, I said to him, "You're not going to believe this. Yeah. This is the friendliest derby I've ever known." Yeah. It's not quite the same now as it was, which is sad. I believe it's sad. Yeah. Because it was special, and I know that anything happens at either club, then the fans do come together then, and that's more like what it was at that time. Yeah, and obviously it wasn't a particularly easy time for the city back then in terms of everything that was going on the political side of things. But it was like a united front, wasn't it? It was they were going there together because of a fierce footballing rivalry, but one city together, and that's kind of what you've said there. Yeah, and obviously the game finished 0-0 after extra time. We were all walking round together, both teams, and everybody singing Merseyside. Yeah, and that was just incredible. I've got a picture up on my wall at home with the two teams mixed in. Yeah, which is just special. Yeah, and then there was obviously the replay as well. But then after that, there obviously must have been bitterly disappointing. But then an injury as well for yourself. Well, the injury came actually against Stoke in the third round of the FA Cup. Right, so you've been carrying that from before. Yeah. I got tackled, at Stoke, and my knee got pushed back. Right, and a piece of bone chipped off the back of my kneecap. I was really lucky because I was able to continue to play. My knee would swell up at different times and so on, but I was able to keep on playing. Mm-hmm. In those days, we didn't have the medical care that obviously there is now. Yeah. And so it really was a case of, let's see how far you can get, see if you can get through to the end of the season. Yeah. And I'd played in every round of the FA Cup up until the semi-final. Yeah. Which was after the replay. The replay was the game that did it. We'd gone the 120 minutes down at Wembley at the weekend, and a few days later we're playing the replay on quite a heavy pitch, as Wembley was as well, and my knee just blew up. Yeah, and it was a case of I couldn't carry on anymore, and so I was devastated because obviously I'd been involved in every cup game for the Milk Cup as it was then, and every game up until the semi-final for the FA Cup, and I was then lying in bed listening to the Southampton game, and fortunately was able to be down at Wembley and was ecstatic when we won against Watford, and then when the boys went up to get the medals, that was when it hit me. Yeah. That was to playing in every round up to tough. The semi. That was it was a strange thing because here I was 1 minute it was euphoria. Yeah. The next minute I was dejected because I was thinking that was taken away. Yeah. That opportunity was taken away. Yeah, it must have been really bittersweet because you could see they were on the cusp of great things, and for yourself. So how big a decision was that going to Crystal Palace in the summer? big. But during the time, I mean, I looked at it really kind of honestly. I came into football late, professional football late. I didn't want to sit on the sidelines.
No.
There was one sub in those days. I didn't want to be somewhere where what were the chances of the winger being the sub? Not very often. It tended to be midfield players or
people like Alan Harper playing several positions.
Absolutely. Kevin Richardson, who could go in and do different jobs and so on.
Yeah.
As a specialist, probably not.
Yeah.
So while I was out, Trevor had come into the team and was terrific. Took his chance really, really well. I suppose it was a wee bit like the Alan Ainscough situation with me. I got into the team and never went out again.
Yeah.
And Alan left the club.
Yeah.
And I can understand that because I just felt I've got too much time to make up here.
Yeah.
I've not had all these years of being a professional footballer, and a big influence was the fact that Steve Coppell was the manager.
Yeah.
Right winger, who I felt, you can teach me more about this position.
Yeah.
Which he did.
Yeah.
He was great. They had so much admiration for him as a player, and here he was as a young manager, and there was no doubt he was learning about management as he was going on. He clearly became a very good manager, but I just felt as a player, player to player, then he could tell me things that were little gold nuggets that would hopefully make me a better player.
Yeah, are you able to sort of elaborate at all, sort of like the hints and tips, the kind of things that you
down to, so one of the things, for example, was about, if you improve the angle in terms of how you're attacking the player by quite often, instead of just going straight down the line, go a little bit wider and then start to come in. And now you're starting to turn the opponent. And, just, as I say, little bits of gold dust like that, which are really important. And obviously I knew as well he wanted to play with wingers.
Yeah, yeah.
So I went because of those couple of key things, really. I did not want to be standing around waiting for Trevor to get injured or something like that. I was realistic enough to know that he was on the way up as well. So, which, of course, he was.
Yeah, just before we move on to your Everton return, which is a whole 18 years later, I mean, what was it like actually watching after you'd left them there? Obviously, the following season, 85, was obviously the most successful club season in the club's history. I mean, you still obviously no regrets because, as you explained, you wanted to play football, but you must have been made up for the lads and what they went on to achieve there.
Absolutely delighted. They were my friends.
Yeah,
I wanted to see them doing well. I wanted to see the club doing well. The club had been really, really good to me.
Yeah.
So there was no bitterness.
No.
There were no regrets. I made a decision based on playing football. I could have hung around and been on the fringes of what happened, but that wasn't what I wanted to do.
No.
I wanted to play, and I had a real desire to play. My ambition was actually to play till I was 40, because I'd started so late.
Yeah.
So it was a case of I want to do that.
Yeah.
So no, I was absolutely delighted about how things went for the team, and I could see it coming. In any case, I knew it was coming because, as I said earlier, we'd had these few years of all coming in as a group of young players to gradually just building up and becoming a stronger and stronger team. And obviously it's a shame what happened, but that's been talked about by a lot of people, I think. Yeah.
So, whole 18 years on, I mean, it might surprise a lot of people now that you and David didn't know each other particularly well at that time when you got the call. So how did that all come about, as it were?
Well, as you say, we didn't really know each other. Both from Glasgow, but I'm older than David. We didn't come across each other when we were younger players and things like that.
Yeah.
What did happen was he was interested in coaching, started his coaching badges early. I was interested in coaching, started my coaching badges early as well. I started at Crystal Palace.
Yeah.
So I was 26 when I started doing coaching badges. And loved it. we both started bumping into each other at different. There was a managers and coaches course, for example, at in Wimslow. Each year, and we would bump into each other at that. We'd bump into each other at other kind of coaching events. He would be coming and watching the reserve games and stuff like that as well, to try and pick up players either on loan or to sign. So we would talk, and we got on quite well, but we never thought anything of it. What happened was that the day that he got the job at Everton, I wrote him a letter. I was academy director at Newcastle at the time, and I just wrote him a letter saying, it's a fantastic club, you'll absolutely love it, the people are brilliant, fans are brilliant, good luck. And I do that with lots of people, over the years. People that I know, I'll wish good luck. Whether if they lose jobs, I'll console them. If they get a job, I'll wish them all the very best. Didn't think anything of it. Next minute, got a phone call from David saying they were coming up to play Newcastle, one of his early games at St James's, and he said, "I'm coming up. Can I meet you at the hotel?" So the team were at Lumley Castle, and I was up in Darras Hall. I drove down to meet him, not knowing anything about what it was like. Just let's go and have a chat. Might have been asking about players or anything, And he said, would you come as assistant manager? And that was not a difficult decision to make. It was really easy. Actually, I was leaving Newcastle at the time to go and work as one of the coaches for the FA. So this was under Howard Wilkinson's new Charter for Quality. And so I was one of a few people who were targeted for that. And I phoned Howard and said, look, this has come up. I have to take this. And that was another great decision, thankfully. So straight in for obviously David's first full season in charge. I couldn't leave. Newcastle wouldn't let me leave at the end of the season, so I had to finish that off.
So obviously you know all about bringing through young players, and you've got a certain young Wayne Rooney there. He was Premier League ready, wasn't he? I guess at 16.
I had come across Wayne. We had good team at Newcastle. We had good players, and I came across Wayne in an under-17 game, and I thought he's got to be too older than that. He's playing like a man here, And he was sensational. I found out he was 15 at the time.
He was underage,
And it's just like, gee whiz, what a player the boy was. And he had the lot, You're looking at him and going, wow, that's fantastic. And David had obviously mentioned him already as well, because clearly there was a lot of talk about him.
On the one hand, it's obviously a huge blessing, but is that also difficult for a coach? So, given that he's just so ultra talented, how do you deal with somebody like that?
Well, I think David managed the situation very well. I think he probably had the Alex Ferguson, Ryan Giggs situation to look at, which hadn't been so much earlier than that. So that would probably have helped. The big thing was to not spoil him. Not do anything that was going to actually hold him back, rather than thinking we have to do something wonderful to take him forward. Because I mentioned earlier about getting stretched at the right times, and Wayne was getting stretched at the right times, and you had to be mindful of the fact that he was just 16. And clearly, we had a lot of experienced players here. You have to manage that situation. In David's position, you've got to manage, how do you put a 16-year-old in front of a highly experienced player? You've got a big man management issue there. So, David had to do it very carefully, and I think he did it very well. And, of course, Wayne was such a talent that, like I said, don't spoil him. Don't ruin his development by interfering too much,
No, and obviously a great team effort, and I'll just come on to that. But just finally from that season on, Wayne, I mean, it was you see as one of Goodison's special moments, that Arsenal game when he did get his first goal. What do you just remember from the day in terms of the group and how the group reacted to that day?
Well, the group knew. They knew straight away. You could tell senior players are looking at him with respect, right from the beginning of him coming in and training with us. He wasn't a kid. In any way, he wasn't a kid, apart from his age.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he'd already very much earned his place and more or less done what you expect him. What you would expect him to do. I think we're just watching the same thing happening with the boy Yamal.
That was last night.
You see the goal last night, and people are looking and going, "Yeah, that's what he does." Even Mbappe's going, "Yeah, that's all right."
yeah. But it was a terrific season for you, because I think Everton had only finished in the top half of the Premier League once in the previous decade, and. CD finished seventh that year. I mean, it was a big improvement on what had come the years before. I mean, just what would you think was the secret to turning it around so quickly in that respect?
We had a really good meeting up in St Andrews with the players, which we kind of had the players in three different groups, really: goalkeeper and defenders, midfield players, forwards, and we kind of started it off with so let's say that the defenders and the goalkeeper. Okay, what do you need the players in front of you to do to help you to do your job?
Yeah.
And what can you do to help them to do their job? And we had the same questions really with the midfield players and with the forward players. And what we then got out of that was, okay, this is how we're agreeing that we're going to try and move forward. Mm-hmm. This is what you're all saying. You're all accepting that you have to help each other as the different units.
Yeah.
So, okay, this is how we are now going to prepare our training and prepare for matches based on these principles and so on. Nowadays, everybody calls it a philosophy and things. It was, come on, lads, let's very much. The emphasis was on them being asked the right questions in order to kind of get the answers themselves. So straight away we had this real good direction that we were going to try and go in. And then we were fortunate enough, we had a really good pre-season, which was the St Andrews trip was part of that. But we had a really good pre-season, and we came back in really good nick, and we got off to a good start.
Yeah.
And as we see almost every year in the Premier League, the teams that come flying out the traps, they can sustain it, and it can actually carry them all the way. Aston Villa have just done it.
Yeah.
And Brentford have done it recently, and Brighton have done it recently, and West Ham did it as well, So you're in that situation where actually the momentum just carries you along, and you just keep on, we won again. We won again, and then it goes on like that, and then you might have a setback, but that's okay because we've been winning all these games, and you can go again. So it was a combination of those factors, really.
The uphill trajectory continued, but not until after FC had that poor season the year after them, because obviously I remember actually that Everton weren't really in any sort of relegation danger at all, got themselves safe by Easter, but then obviously had the poor finish, so he ended up finishing 17th on 39 points, and he'd never really been in danger. So we were talking before we went on air there about what the job that Sean Dyche has done, and obviously the praise that he deserves. But and as you said, unless you've been in that position, it's really sort of hard to sort of recognise just what it's like for a manager. But what was that like for David on the back of that season? Because people was looking at it from the outside and saying, "Oh, he's lost the dressing room there." I mean, we'll come on to what happened the year after that. But at that particular moment, how hard was it? Because he was still a very young man at the time. What could you see in terms of having taken one step forward and then going backwards a step that year?
Yeah. I mean, it certainly. I mentioned the meeting earlier on at St Andrews.
Yeah.
We did the same thing the following year before the season started.
Yeah.
And we were up at St Andrews again, same room, same preparation, same kind of questions, you know. And the question really then was, okay, we've finished 7th. How do we go better than that? What are we going to do to get better than that? And it was really weak what was coming back. I think actually the group had found it so demanding, finishing 7th. They'd been stretched, really, maybe as far as they could be stretched.
Right.
And I think there were some players who maybe just felt, I can't do that again.
Yeah.
We can't go again, you know, and reach those kind of levels. And, you know, obviously we didn't do well. As you rightly say, it was a poor season and a poor end. But, you know, typical of David, you know, that just became more of a challenge, and let's get everybody refocused and go again. And we know that season we finished 4th, you know.
Yeah.
Again, good start.
Yeah. Exactly. You said just the point you were making before. Actually, it was on the basis of that excellent start that carried you over in the second half of the season, when obviously things got tougher. But I mean, going into that season, given the way that the previous season had finished with the poor ending, Wayne had ended up going early on in the summer as well. The players that they brought in, I mean, obviously Tim Cahill ended up being a talisman. Marcus Bent for not much money at all, but he kind of took the footballing world by storm, really, and nobody really expected it.
No, they didn't. Everybody was full of doom and gloom because we, as you say, we just lost Wayne, and you know what we're going to do now, and you know, well, people didn't know Tim at that time, for example, but there was still a group of good characters coming together and things there as well as good players, but good characters. And David was good at signing good characters. Yeah. And always has been. Does a lot of homework on the personalities. So yeah, I think probably it was a case of maybe proving everybody wrong. Yeah. You know, it was like, just had a really poor end to the season. Just lost Wayne Rooney. Disaster. Everton are in trouble again, you know. Yeah. And I think there was a real feeling within the dressing room, well, don't think we are.
No. You mentioned about the characters and the homework you've done, because obviously you'd be part of that process with him. Obviously, I imagine it has changed over the years, but how does he go about it? How did you go about it as a team with your scouts and identifying targets?
Well, football's a village. It's become a bigger village now because it's obviously international, but it's quite easy to find somebody that you know who's worked with a player that you're thinking about signing, or who knows somebody that can give information. And it really is a case of gathering as much information as you can. You can see what players are like. That's the easy part. On the pitch is the easy part. You want to know what's happening behind the scenes. How are they? Do they turn up and train well every day? Do they, you know, are they ultra professional as far as that's concerned, or are they actually they're bad characters? They're going to drag some of the other players down and things if things aren't going well for them. So it's really, really important that you find out as much as you can about the personalities. It has become harder, there's no doubt. I mean, I spoke to Ray Harford about Tim Cahill. Ray Harford had been at Millwall, and he was raving about him. And Ray Harford was a really good coach. So, you know, that was a bit of information. It wasn't the reason that we signed Tim Cahill, but it was certainly helpful and useful information.
Yeah, and that season remains obviously special in terms of it remains the club's highest Premier League finish. Just how big an achievement do you think that actually was for the group and for you as a staff?
I thought it was huge because, like you said, it was starting off in the wrong footing. People were ready to crucify us, and probably people ready to get rid of David at that particular time. But the chairman was magnificent. You know, he did all the right things as far as David was concerned. David is extremely thorough in what he does. He is unbelievably professional. His attention to detail is magnificent. He's a workaholic. He demands really high standards of himself and of everybody that's involved. And Bill knew that. Bill knew that actually he needed to just kind of get David to lighten up a little bit.
Right.
Bill managed David really well. Picked him up when he was down, and you don't really have to keep David down because he's on the next game really quickly, as a lot of us are. You win a game in football, and you walk into the dressing room, you say well done to the players, and you turn to the staff and say who's next. Yeah. You lose a game and you're still dwelling on it by the next Friday. So it's something we're not great. We're not great at enjoying the victories.
No.
We suffered in the defeats, but David was very focused and very driven. So but as I say, Bill helped a great deal. Yeah. And that momentum we're talking about as well. I remember how many games did we win late in on Tuesday nights under the lights. Yeah. I sat with Roy Keane at a game one time when I was academy director at Everton, and he'd come to watch the game, and he was saying, I hated coming here under the lights on a Tuesday night. Yeah, it was so difficult to win. Yeah,
well, you mentioned that actually right in the running. That was a midweek one. Manchester United, of course. Yeah, and Duncan Ferguson. He'd done it a decade earlier when he was in his prime. But by this stage, you were managing him. I think he was often like the super sub, but I think he started. I think he started that night. Obviously, David decided that he was the one to go with. I mean, what was it like dealing with him at that stage in his career? I mean,
Duncan clearly had a lot of injury issues. So you then you're never going to get game after game after game out of Duncan at that stage. So all you can do really is manage him as best you can and put him in and drop him out and put him in and drop him out. Bring him in off the bench and things like that. He wasn't able, because of the injury situations, to play every single game, which a lot of players obviously are desperate to do. Yeah. Duncan knew that he couldn't do that. So
he's the man of the big occasion, though, wasn't he?
Absolutely. But his training was modified. He didn't do a lot of the training sessions with the rest of the players. He was looked after in a different way. Yeah. So then, the highs of finishing fourth and getting into the Champions League again. I mean, I was speaking to Leon Osman only yesterday about this. The Villarreal game, the Villarreal draw in the first place, getting them, and then obviously the way things panned out. And again, Duncan again. I guess if we had a VAR back then, I'd like to think that goal would have stood, but I mean, must still rankle almost what we got. Of course, obviously we thought we were fourth, and just qualifying without any doubt. Then we find that we actually have to play in the qualifier, which was a blow in itself. And when the draw was made, I remember Mikel standing up and storming out of the
draw was made, out
of the dining room when he saw the draw. It was like threw his hands up in the air, and he knew how good Villarreal were. Yeah, we were a bad refereeing decision away from winning that. Yeah. How much do you think that impacted on that particular season? Because obviously, then you really struggled until about Christmas time, and a real strong finish to mid-table in the end. But obviously, it was Dinamo Bucharest on the back of that as well. It was a real tough start following that result. Yeah, tough in many ways. Going right back to the, now we have to go and play in this qualifier. That was tough itself, and then the nature of the way the game went, and as you say, we went out to Bucharest, and where that came from, I don't know. I remember at half time in the game, and we're thinking we're in a really good position here, and all of a sudden we just lost a few goals and gave ourselves a mountain to climb. But like a lot of teams without the biggest squads, find it's tough when you're playing these midweek games and coming back, to then play again. And then it wasn't quite as sympathetic back then either. You'd be travelling a lot, and you'd be back on there weren't all these adjustments in terms of fixtures. So I know that people complain a lot about the demands nowadays, but believe me, they were really tough then as well, you know. And it was pretty much there's the same players that went out time after time. In order for us to win games at the level that we were trying to play at, we needed our best team out on the pitch. We didn't have squad rotation. It was the same lads who went again and again and again. Yeah.
Do you remember how you were able to just gradually turn that around then in terms of fixing it and getting back to winning ways?
I think, you know, strange as it sounds, but going out of the European competitions gives you that chance now to breathe again and to start to do the kind of work that you can't do when you're preparing for a game or recovering for a game every few days. You get very little actual work done. You know, it's pretty much recover, prepare, play. There's nothing kind of in between in terms of just your normal training weeks and things like that. So that made it easier, albeit it's not what we wanted for sure.
Yeah. And then what was your final season before you went on to management yourself? I mean, it was one of the years where you were able to get business done early with David signing Joleon Lescott. Tim Howard came on loan as well. I think Andrew Johnson as well, wasn't it? All pretty early in the summer. I mean, and that was sort of like the springboard for another positive season, getting the business done early.
Yeah, absolutely. And people talk about that a lot, don't they? You know, and especially when, you know, David, the way that he worked, he needed players to be in, you know, as early as possible, start of pre-seasons, so that they could understand what was required of them, you know. And if you remember, Joleon kind of started off playing at left back and things, you know.
Leighton Baines couldn't get a game.
Baines, he wasn't playing, no. And so, you know, you know, most of the time, David, when he signed players from the Championship, and even, you know, recently, in recent years with Jared Bowen, they don't play all the time, but gradually they get used to what is required of them, and then they start to fly. So
you mentioned about how it was an easy decision for you to come back and join David at Everton. So how much of it was it an easy decision when you actually got a chance to become a manager yourself?
David actually put my name forward for it, because he still had a good relationship and still does with Derek Shaw, who was at Preston as a chairman, and David actually was talking to Derek, and Derek had said, I'm looking for a new manager, and David said, you should speak to Alan. And I had just finished doing the diploma in football management. So clearly I was thinking that way, albeit that, you know, I didn't chase the job. That, you know, I was happy where I was. Things were going well with the team, obviously. But this opportunity seemed like a great opportunity for me to go and do it myself. And it was a good decision. I'm pleased to say there are other decisions that were bad decisions, but this was a good decision.
And when we were chatting earlier, you were saying for all the coaching and all your experience in football, too, you've actually been the gaffer, as it were. That nobody can truly sort of know what that feels like.
No, I'd been 15 years learning about coaching, from being a youth team coach through being a first team coach up at Newcastle with Kenny Dalglish, to being an academy director at Newcastle, assistant manager at Everton. That's 15 years. I'd done every coaching badge you could do. I'd done every management, football management course that you could do. Been to so many different coaching presentations and so on as well, and sat in the chair the first day and got a shock. Thinking, well, I wasn't quite expecting that. So how anybody walked straight into a management job from being a player, I don't know. Are
you able to enlighten us in any way, just in terms of what kind of are the shocks? Or
everything's all the cues are outside your door.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to see you. You know, as an assistant manager, you kind of go along and you don't deal with the media, you don't deal with the fans, you don't deal with the board. You know, you don't have the disputes with the players. You can be the nice guy kind of thing, you know, and pick them up again and so on. You can be everybody's friend, basically. When you're the manager, the queue's outside your door. It's huge. It's never ending. Everybody wants to see you. I remember I was filling in, taking a team in pre-season at Newcastle for Kenny. And I walked in to do the press afterwards, and a couple of the press guys walked out.
Oh, because it wasn't Kenny?
Because it wasn't Kenny.
Wow.
And they walked out, and you just think, well, I get that.
All right, okay.
Whereas they're not walking out when the manager walks in, you know. So I had, it was just more intense and more demanding than I thought. I loved it, incidentally, but it was, it took a little bit of getting used to at the beginning.
And then, obviously, like you said, David recommended you for the job, but then he asked you back again, and then a third time at the club working with the younger players. Yeah,
he'd been on at me for quite a while, and Bill had as well, because there were some changes being done within the academy. Ray Hall was wanting to step aside, and so they. Both Bill and David were on the phone for quite a few months, trying to kind of get me to do it, and I was trying to think whether I wanted to go back into youth development or not, and I wouldn't have taken it anywhere else. I took it on the basis that it was Everton, first of all, and for all that I've been really lucky to be at a lot of really good clubs, this is the club that means the most to me. So it was Everton, and I wouldn't have gone in with anybody else. And it was David and it was Bill, and I knew that they would let me get on with the job, and I knew they would support me. They wouldn't interfere, because you shouldn't interfere, because you don't know what's going on.
No.
You know, having been the manager, having been an academy director, youth team coach, you don't know what's going on. You think you do, but you don't, because there's a hell of a lot more to any job, isn't there, than people see from the outside. So even, you know, the manager does not know everything. And I knew that I could get the support that I needed from Bill and from David whenever I needed it. And I think they knew that I wouldn't be coming to them with some kind of ridiculous requests, you know. So it was based on key people. Robert Elstone as well, incidentally, who I also knew he'll trust me. He'll let me do the job, and if I ask for something, they'll do what they can to get me it. You know. Yeah.
Before I come on to your final thoughts on Goodison, obviously you worked with David again, and then at West Ham United, able to sort of, without obviously asking you to give away any secrets, how has he changed? Because he was only like 38 years old, obviously, when he started at Everton. Like himself now, he's in his 60s. How has he evolved? How has he changed as a manager in that time, do you think?
You cannot be a manager for that length of time without changing, without adjusting to the way the game has gone. You know, and there's been a lot of changes in the way the game has been played over those years. Some of them that are getting done now are things that were done many years ago.
Invented the wheel,
absolutely. You know, pressing was done many years ago, and it was just called something different. You know, counter-attacking has been there for all these years as well, and you know, so it's a lot of things just come round again. And I think if you had to look at a lot of formations nowadays, you might see a WM in there, you know, going really far back in terms of where players are positioned. But so it's tweaks on old themes, if you like, and the managers have to continually adapt. And one of David's biggest things is that at the end of every season, he sits down and he goes, how can I be better? And you know, you're now dealing with a very different dressing room than you did before.
Yeah, different generation. Yeah.
Huge in terms of actually, it's different generation, different nationalities, different cultures, different, in so many ways, different languages.
Yeah.
So you're now trying to pull together a whole load of people who have come from completely different backgrounds. And, the old saying used to be treat everybody the same. Impossible.
Yeah.
In any workplace, it's impossible. You have to treat people all fairly, but you've got to treat them differently.
Yeah.
And players have got to understand that as well, and I think they do now. Yeah. So David he's adapted. Yeah. He's adapted to the way that football has changed. He's adapted to the way that society has changed. Yeah. And has he mellowed? Slightly, but I would say not massively, because again, you need to kind of have a go at people sometimes within this game. But you can't be falling out with everybody either, and that goes back years. You mentioned earlier, we lost the dressing room. Yeah. That's something that people will say from time to time if the results aren't going well. I've not been in too many dressing rooms that have been lost, to be perfectly honest. It kind of doesn't happen. No. Some people are fed up because they haven't been picked in the team, or they've been taken off or something. But yeah.
And then, so your final thoughts on Goodison Park, because you mentioned that Everton is a team that means the most to you. You grew up as a Rangers fan. I guess Goodison Park looks quite like Ibrox in a lot of ways. Yeah. But what is it about Goodison Park that you think you'll miss the most?
Well, it was home. It was a fantastic place to play. I loved walking down to the reception. In my last job with David, I came to a lot of games. And I absolutely loved the walk from the car park to the main reception. Fantastic. Meeting the people who have been there for years and years and years. It's a lot of real strong connections from even the first time that I was here. Yeah. So it's absolutely astonishing how long lots of people have worked for the club. Yeah. The atmosphere in the street outside, I get treated really, really well when I come, and it's it's still, I still get a buzz when I kind of walk out and look at the pitch, and when the place is really bouncing. I absolutely love that. Will I miss the stadium? Yeah. It's a real shame that it has to go, but it has to go. Yeah. And the new stadium looks magnificent. And I think once people get over the newness of it, it can be, a huge improvement for the club. It's essential. Yeah. Nowadays, it's essential. It'd be lovely to think you could just make Goodison bigger where it was and do all the work there, but you can't. So
terrific. Thank you so much, Alan Irvine.
You're welcome.